Every year, Owl fans get to vote on who the most valuable player in the league is from a selection of 10 players voted for from within Owl by coaches, GMs, or whoever else. This year had a lot of potential candidates who could have made the list, and as such, some players were bound to be snubbed. But the list we got is missing some crucial players that makes it feel wrong. This is amplified by Owl imposing a limitation of only 3 players per team making the list, which means one of the Atlanta or Houston stars are snubbed by default. And I get that it might be more interesting with a more diverse range of players, but I don't like players not being recognized just because they are playing beside other GOATs. Or if you're gonna impose limitations at all, go all the way and allow only 1 or 2 per team. If 2 players are gonna get snubbed specifically, just say fuck it and go the extra mile. The list is comprised of 2 tanks, Someone and Fearless, 4 supports, Fielder, Shoe, Violet, and Skewed, and finally 4 damage, Stalker, Lip, and make sure you're sitting down for this one. Remove all dangerous items from your general area, Merit, and Zest. You can maybe make a fringe argument for either Merit or Zest, but with some of the names not here, this just ain't it. Before I talk about who should be here instead, we need to define what it means to be the season MVP. There are 2 different definitions, either the best player of the year or the most valuable player. For example, some might say that because Atlanta would have 4 MVP candidates without the team limitation, none of them deserve to be the most valuable player, because how can there be 4 possible MVPs on the same squad? My truth is somewhere in the middle. Using the most valuable player aspect makes the conversation more interesting, but sometimes the best player is simply the best and they cannot be ignored. With that said, Merit isn't even the best damage player on his team. Checkmate has been outperforming him the entire season. In the spring knockouts, when Florida was sent down to the lower bracket, who was it that focused up and completely dismantled every team in front of him? It was not Merit. This whole season, Checkmate hasn't taken a game off and has been a different breed on Tracer, Echo, Mei, and even Genji. When's the last time you can remember Checkmate being outworked by the opposing flex DPS? Maybe against Atlanta, Houston, or Kevster, but regardless, the answer is hardly ever. Moreover, I'd go on to have Chorong over Merit in this conversation. Chorong has been the perfect main support for this hyper flexible Florida team and has not only been satisfactory on his hero picks, but he has excelled at every turn. He is a top 3 brig at the absolute lowest, and the only player who's been getting more consistent value on Kiriko is Violet. Nobody else. Don't get it twisted. Merit is a very good player. He's an insane hit scan talent and was one of the best Hanzo hit scans in the first half, while also showing that he can flex onto either Sombra or even Tracer when need be. And he's been a top 5 Sombra this year. However, to claim him as a top 4 damage player and the second best hit scan Sombra player in the league makes less sense than this year's format. As for Zest, in the back half of the year, he's been lights out and easily one of the best DPS in the East, especially with Choice A1 out of the picture. But because voting closes before even the summer knockouts and the play-ins, I don't see how 8 insane games in a life support region with literal contenders teams in the mix overwrites 10 matches of pretty good but not MVP level gameplay, especially considering how the Infernal went winless in the midseason madness. I understand that we don't want to punish players for being in the weaker region, but be serious. The East is middle school basketball tier right now. If the nominations were released after the regular season, play-ins and all, Zest probably ends up being a valid choice. But at this exact moment, his placement feels a bit invalid with how much other talent got snubbed that were playing at an MVP level all year. Now you may be pondering, well, who really got snubbed? If Zest and Merit aren't the ones, then who are? Well, there's this role called main support. And it just so happens Chio has been having an unmatched season. One might say he's having the highest impact a main support has ever had in the league relative to its competition. The synergy he's displayed alongside Fielder has been inspirational. We're talking Shaggy and Scooby-Doo, Gator and NFT's level coordination. With how few individual mistakes he makes, we have to consider if he's undergone experimental surgery to implant CarQ tips and tricks on Brig directly into his brainstem. Violet is a flashier player and brings more flexibility to the table for sure, but it's very difficult to argue that he is more deserving of MVP at this point. Speaking of Violet, where is a Houston DPS? Happy has been compared to Merit all season because he directly replaced him on the Houston roster, and they're very similar players. While Happy has had similar results to Merit on Hitscan, he went above and beyond with his Tracer and Sombra gameplay. This guy has been playing both of them to the highest level as a Hitscan player. Nobody else is doing that. Not a single soul. And you can guarantee there is not a single individual on this planet who wants Merit over Happy. I'd straight up rather have Happy over Violet or even Fearless right now, but again, you shouldn't have to choose. This is exactly why the 3 from a team rule is dumb. It has good intentions, but it's completely horrendous. Ignoring that and staying in the same vein with the DPS picks, what the fuck happened to the Alpha Yi narrative? I get that Washington have been dog shit in the summer stage, but Alpha Yi is the one who dragged them kicking and screaming to relevance in the first place. And it isn't like Alpha Yi himself is playing poorly, he's still going berserk. But if you put your Brig on ping, take away Flora's ability to gamble, and put your benched main tank on Ana, it becomes enough to break even God's strongest soldier. The stats lab may have been murdered in cold blood, but we can still do some detective work. The most Fleta deadlifts a player had over the entirety of last year in winning maps was 4 from Proper and Shy. Alpha Yi has 4 in the first half of this year alone, and the next highest is Stalker with 2. I don't care who they were against or what the meta differences were, he caught up to the same number of Proper's deadlifts in half the time and still got snubbed from the MVP race. Alpha Yi was the embodiment of the most valuable player for this entire season, and for him to not even get a nod is embarrassing. But it still doesn't end. There is not a single Boston player on this ballot. Decay has been insane since day one, both being a one-man army and the CEO of Dive Incorporated at the same time, while Twilight has been landing anti-nades like he has a protractor glued to his screen and is the Oppenheimer of biotic grenades. Please give either of them a look, a glance over Merit or Zest, I beg. And finally, if you really want an APAC candidate, Leave is right there. He's been the one to clutch up when the spark needed him most every time. While Zest was folding to the mayhem in the midseason madness, Leave stepped it up and put on a show. There's also Hanbin as an option. He both made the Fuel look like some semblance of a team in the first half, and then once his teammates gained back control of their motor function, his Winston was above average. I just cannot see how the Infernal got 2 MVP candidates. There have been numerous times this year when they haven't been the best in the East, and even when they have been, it has not been that dominant. So there's at least 9 players I have ahead of Zest and Merit, and you could argue a case against Skewed if you really want to, although I do not. Before voting starts, I'll have a video talking about who I think the MVP is, so be sure to subscribe if you don't want to miss it, and let me know who you think got robbed of a nomination in the comments down below. Have yourself a good one. Deuces.